Hi, this is Carol Beavis, and I'd like to share with you some highlights of my mixed methods research on podcasting in kindergarten. Kindergartners are required to write responses to certain pieces of literature. These performance-based writing assessments, or PBAs as we call them, are scored according to a rubric. The purpose of this study was to examine how podcasting would affect at-risk students' writing scores. Writing is a demanding task for kindergartners, and this research asked if podcasting would be an effective intervention for these students. My focus was to answer the following questions. Does offering students an oral alternative increase the students' abilities to compare and contrast characters, events, or dilemmas in stories? Is podcasting a valid tool to make the connection of what I say can be written? And does using podcasts increase the student scores on our performance-based writing assessments? These performance-based writing assessments are new for kindergarten this year, and this study offered an oral alternative to the demanding task of this assessment. This will help determine if the at-risk students can orally perform the requirements of the PBA rubric. Can these students orally demonstrate what they know about literature in ways their writing is not yet demonstrating? The participants were 4 at-risk students, 2 of whom were ELL students as well. They were identified by falling into the red category on their DIBELS assessment at the beginning of the year. During this study, the students participated in 4 performance-based writing assessments. They stayed with the class for a portion that required the students to listen to the literature and to illustrate how the story related to their own life. The class was then asked to dictate or write the response on the illustrations. However, for my research participants, I used Podomatic and asked them to narrate their literature responses. I added their artwork to the podcast so they might easily identify it as their own, and then they were given many opportunities for repeated listenings of their own podcast. Their narration was then scored according to the PBA rubric. For data purposes, a codebook was created to give a numerical identifier to track their progress according to the rubric in the categories of ideas, organization, and elaboration. I also counted how many words the student narrated pre- and post-podcasting. I then wrote one sentence from each podcast on a sentence strip, cut it up, and asked the students to put it back together again. I observed and kept a running log of anecdotal records on the number of attempts it took to put it together and what they said about the conventions of language and their frustration levels. As you can see from this chart, in the areas of ideas and organization, students showed growth. However, in the category of elaboration, they did not show many significant gains. In understanding what I say can be written, evidenced by their restructuring of their sentences, students did show gains. In comparing literature to their own lives, the data collected in anecdotal records indicated little progress. As you can see this in my paper, it's quite lengthy. In conclusion, without comparing these students with those who did not participate in the intervention, it's difficult to conclude if their scores were affected by podcasting or of the one-on-one work with the teacher, their maturity level, or any interventions that they may have had at home. For future research, students who participated in the intervention need to be compared with the students who did not receive the intervention. This research also needs a longer time frame so that the benchmark scores can be obtained at the beginning and the end of the intervention. Our benchmarks won't be completed till the end of May, so this intervention needs a longer period of time. In the end, this was a positive experience for these students. They benefited from the intervention, most likely because of the one-on-one encounters with the teacher. They really enjoyed finally having a product that they could share with the rest of the class. They worked hard and never once put their head down and gave up in ways they did when they were asked to write. They encouraged each other and were critical of their own work, often saying, "No, let's do it over again." This was a good intervention to differentiate instruction for this group of students.